Hello, I'm Steve Friedman with Rockstar Excel. Today I'm going to show you how to create a Dungeons & Dragons encounter building tool in Excel using XLOOKUPs. If you found this video because you're a Dungeons & Dragons fan, hi, I make videos on using Excel to make your life easier. If you're one of my regular viewers, I'm sure you'll be shocked to know that the guy who makes Excel videos is a huge nerd. In this video, I'll be using a lot of XLOOKUPs. XLOOKUP is a function that finds a value in one row and returns a value from another column in the same row. If you've ever used VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP is the newer version that's both more powerful and easier to work with. Here's the background on what I'm trying to do. I'm running a Dungeons & Dragons game and want to set up battles that are the right amount of difficulty for my players. The books give instructions on how to do that, but the instructions involve a lot of math where small tweaks can cause huge changes. When I read those instructions, my first thought was, this sounds like a job for Excel. If you're not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, player characters have a level from 1 to 20, which is a measure of how powerful they are, while monsters have a power that's measured in experience points, which typically range from 25 to many thousands. In order to figure out how difficult an encounter is, you start with this table that shows for each character level how many monsters' experience points would be easy, medium, hard, or deadly. But this table is just for one player, and your party will have several. So you have to find the correct row for each character in the party and add the numbers together. But that just gives you your baseline. The more monsters the players are fighting at once, the harder it is, because monsters are attacking more often. 2 500 XP monsters are harder than 1000 XP monster, and 5 200 XP monsters are much harder. So you have to add up the XP of the monsters, and then apply a multiplier based on how many monsters there are according to this table. But there's yet another wrinkle. These tables were designed using the assumption that the party has between 3 and 5 players in it. If there's only 1 or 2, encounters will be harder, and if there are 6 or more, encounters will be easier. So you've got to adjust the multiplier based on that. You can see why I don't want to manually calculate that every time. When you're making complicated tools in Excel, you can either start with what you want the output to be, or start with information you have. In this case, it's better to start with what I have. I'm going to copy this table using Table Capture, which is a free plugin for Chrome. So I'm going to highlight this table, and then I'm going to right-click on it to get to Table Capture, and then I'm going to launch Table Capture, and then I'm going to click on this button to copy it. Then I'm going to go into Excel, and I'm going to paste this table. Now I want to delete this extra header row, and I want this character level column to be just numbers and not the ordinals. Now you can check out my video on cleaning data for some fancy methods of doing this, but here the brute force method is going to work best. So I'm going to go to Find and Select and choose Replace, and I'm going to find TH and replace that with nothing, and replace all. And then I'm just going to manually type over first, second, and third with 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to name this tab Character XP Table. Next, I want to make a table for the multiplier. Let's just go ahead and name the tab Multiplier. Now, if you look here, this table is really not in Excel readable format. So I'm just going to recreate it in a more useful form. So I'm going to put numbers from 1 to 14, and a quick little shortcut to do that. You just type 1 and 2 and then drag down like that on the fill handle or green box here. And then next to 1, I'll put 1, then 1.5, and then... Okay, so now I've just manually recreated this table. Now I'm going to add 2 more tabs called Summary and Calculations. And then on the Summary tab, I'm going to put a section for characters, and I'm going to say level, number of characters at that level. I'll come back and format this later, but for now I want a total that sums up the total number of characters. Let's put some test data here to make the next part easier. Let's say there are 2 5th level characters, 2 6th level characters, and 1 7th level character. Now we're ready to start doing our actual calculations. The first thing to do is calculate the base XP thresholds for the party. So let's go over to this Calculations tab and start off with formulas that just copy the character level and number of characters from the Summary tab. So we can just copy these headers and just say equals. You'll notice that our equals formula here converted blanks to zeros. That's fine. Things are allowed to look ugly in our Calculations tab. If I were making this for a client, I might make this look a little neater, but I'm not going to worry about that when I'm just making a tool for myself. Now I want to use an XLOOKUP to look up the difficulty thresholds by level. So I'm going to say equals XLOOKUP, parentheses, select A3, and then I'm going to hit F4 3 times to make the column absolute and the row relative. And if you're using a Mac, you would hit Command T instead of F4. And check out my videos on absolute and relative references for more information on why I'm doing this. Comma. Then I'm going to go over to this XP table, and I'm going to select column A, and I'm going to hit F4 to make that absolute. And then I'm going to select column B, and I'm going to leave that relative and close parentheses. This is giving me an error, which is fine. I'm going to explain that in a minute, but I'm going to fill that down and across to fill out the rest of the table. Now, the reason I'm getting this error is because this XLOOKUP here is trying to find a 0 for the level, but if we look on the character XP table, there's no 0 here. There's a few different ways I could put error checking into my formula with if functions or if error functions, but instead I'm going to cheat this with a shortcut. I'm just going to go to this table here, and I'm going to insert a row and put a 0 there and just put zeros across the board here. And now if I go back to the Calculations tab, instead of giving me errors, it's giving me zeros here, which is what I want because I want to add up the actual numbers. So adding extra zeros in there isn't going to impact anything. Now that we've looked up these thresholds, we need to multiply them by the number of characters at each level. And we're just going to say equals that, the easy column, times the number of characters, and we're going to hit F4 3 times to make that column absolute. And we're just going to fill that down and across, and just making sure here that this all makes sense. So like here we've got 2 5th level characters, and the 5th level totals are twice as much as for 1 5th level character. And then we just want to have the total here and add these up. And let's just go ahead and also put the total number of characters on this page as well. Now let's copy these XP thresholds over to our summary page. And equals, go back to the calculations and just get that total and fill that over. So now we know what the total thresholds for the party are on our summary. But this is if they're only fighting one monster. Remember, if there are more monsters, we have to apply a multiplier to the monster's experience points. Sometimes in Excel, it's better to think about the result you want and work backwards. In this case, instead of adding up the monster's experience points and then multiplying it, I'd rather divide these thresholds by the multiplier and then compare that to the raw totals of the monster's experience points. So I'm going to build a dynamically generated table that tells me what the total monster XP should be for any number of monsters. So I'm going to set up this table by copying the numbers 1 through 14 to this summary tab here. And I'm not going to worry about adjusting for large or small party size for now. I'll come back to that. So I'll start in the upper left box of the table, equals, and then I'm going to select this space easy threshold here, and I'm going to hit F4 twice to make it an absolute row but relative column, and I'm going to divide that by XLOOKUP, and then I'm going to click on the number of monsters, and then I'm going to hit F4 3 times to make that column absolute, then a comma, and then I'm going to go to this multiplier tab, select column A, and hit F4 to make that absolute, comma, and select column B and hit F4 to make that absolute as well, and close parentheses. So this XLOOKUP is finding the number of monsters and returning the multiplier, and this overall formula is dividing the base experience threshold by the multiplier. And now I can just fill this down and across. And this formatting is ugly, but I'll come back and clean up the formatting later. So now we've got something useful. This table tells me that if I want a medium difficulty encounter with 4 monsters, their experience points should add up to between 1475 and 2200. And you'll see if I go to the characters here and change this to say 1 6th-level character, these numbers will all dynamically update when I do that. Now let's fix this for large or small party sizes. Remember, if the party size is smaller than 3, you move up to the next higher multiplier, and if it's larger than 5, you move to the next lower multiplier. But if you look here at the list of multipliers, you'll notice the difference between each step is 0.5. We can use that to take a shortcut. Let's go over to our Calculations tab and add a field called Party Size Multiplier Adjustment. And we're going to use a nested double if function here. It equals if, parentheses, the total number of characters is less than 3, comma, 0.5 is what we want to return if that's the case, comma, and then if that's false, you want to do another if function and say if the number of characters is greater than 5, comma, then return negative 0.5, comma, and otherwise return 0, and then close parentheses, close parentheses. So right now, because we've got 4 characters, this is returning a 0. If we have 5 5th-level characters, so now we've got 7 characters total. You go back to the calculation page and it's returning negative 0.5. If we change this to 0 5th-level characters and the calculation page, it's telling us positive 0.5. Now go back to this table here and we're going to modify this formula to account for that adjustment. So we're just going to click right into the formula and add a parentheses here before this XLOOKUP, and then just say plus, and then go over to the calculations here and click on the party size adjustment and hit F4 to make that absolute, close parentheses. And now we'll fill this down and across. And now it is adding that adjustment in before it divides by the multiplier. So now I've got a table where I can easily see what category the encounter falls into based on the number of monsters in total XP. And it becomes a lot more predictable. I can think, what happens if I add another 500 XP monster, and then quickly look on the table to see. But I still need to add up the experience points and find the total on the table. I want Excel to do that automatically. So now I'm going to add a section to list the monsters. So I'll put in fields for the name, how much XP it's worth, how many monsters there are, and the total XP, which will just be the XP times how many there are. Fill that down so that you can add a bunch of different monsters. Let's just go ahead and put more space in that column. And then I want to add up the total XP and the number of monsters. Now I want Excel to use these numbers to tell me what category the encounter falls into. I could do this in one formula using a nested double XLOOKUP, but that's a bit more advanced than I like to get in these videos, so I'll do it in 2 steps instead. I'll show the more advanced method as a bonus at the end of this video. Here's the easier 2-step method. First, I want to put some test data in here for monsters. Let's say there are 3 ogres worth 450 XP each, and 1 minotaur worth 700 XP. So we've got 4 monsters totaling 2050 XP. And let's go back up here and change this so there are 2 5th level characters. So below this table, I'm going to put a section called Current Thresholds. And then I'm going to set this to equal the number of monsters. And then I'm going to do an XLOOKUP, where I say equals XLOOKUP, parentheses, look up the number of monsters, hit F4 to make that absolute, comma, then select as my range the list of numbers of monsters, hit F4 to make that range absolute, comma, and then select the XP points from the table for easy, leave that relative, and close parentheses, and then fill that across. And you can see that this now is just copying down the results for 4. And you can double check that if we change the number of monsters here, that this number updates. Now I'm going to move this down and then create a field for fight difficulty. And now I'm going to put an XLOOKUP here that checks the total XP against this section, equals XLOOKUP, parentheses, and it goes down here, comma, and then I'm going to select these current thresholds, comma, and then the words easy, medium, hard, and deadly. Now, normally that would be the end of an XLOOKUP formula, but we aren't trying to find the exact number here. We're looking for the closest number in our range that's smaller than this number. You can do that in an XLOOKUP, but you need to add some extra parameters. I'm going to hit comma again, and now if you look at this helper text here for the formula, it says if not found. We don't want to use that parameter, so we're going to hit comma again, and now it's saying match mode, and it gives us this key here of what the arguments we can put in are. We're going to say -1 to say exact match or next smaller item, and then close parentheses. And just to confirm this isn't a typo, there are supposed to be 2 commas in a row in this formula. If we hit enter on that, it's telling us that this fight with 2 monsters that add up to 1,150 XP is easy, which you can see here. It falls into this area between that. If we say had 2 minotaurs, then we'd have 3 monsters that add up to 1850, which would be between hard and deadly, so this is correct. Let's do some error checking on this. One thing you can do when error checking is put in some extreme numbers to see what happens. Let's go ahead and change these ogres to 0. But let's say we were fighting 2 Godzillas at 1,000,000 experience points each. And that tells us it's deadly, which certainly makes sense because 2,000,000 is more than 3,533. But what if we were fighting 2 ants worth 1 XP each? Well, now that gives us an error. Why is it giving us an error? If you look at our table here, an easy encounter starts at 766 XP, but there's no number smaller than that. So the XLOOKUP can't find what category to put this into. On a conceptual level, this is saying that the encounter is too easy to be worthwhile, which makes sense. What's the point of having the player step on a couple of ants? So let's go back to our formula. Now, remember the first optional parameter we skipped past of if not found. That means you can tell the XLOOKUP what to return instead of an error if it can't find what it's looking for. So here, let's put in quotes, too easy. And now, that's what it returns. But if we were to say these were giant ants, worth 500 XP, then it changes it back to easy, because 1,000 is between 766 and 1566. So our spreadsheet is working. And at this point, we're pretty much done. All that's left is some quick formatting to make this look a little nicer. So that was making a D&D encounter tool using XLOOKUPs. If you want to learn the advanced method of a nested double XLOOKUP, stay tuned to the end of the video. Otherwise, please like and subscribe, and let me know in comments if you want me to do more of these long-form tutorials. And check out rockstarexcel.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter for tips on using Excel to make your life easier, submit questions to be answered in a future video, and book a free consultation to learn how we can save you time and money with consulting and done-for-you solutions. And now here's the advanced technique I promised. To find this encounter difficulty using just one formula, we need to find numbers on both horizontal and vertical axes. The old way of doing this was with index and match. In the main part of the video, to make things clearer, I did this with two separate XLOOKUPs and a helper row. But you can do it with one formula by nesting an XLOOKUP inside of another XLOOKUP. The way to do that is start with an XLOOKUP for your XP total. So you say equals XLOOKUP, and then you select the XP total, comma, and then for your range, use another XLOOKUP formula. So XLOOKUP, parentheses, and then you want to select the number of monsters here, comma, and then the range of values that you want to look at is going to be the number of monsters here, comma, and then the return range, you're actually going to select all four of these columns here in this table, which is not what you would normally do in XLOOKUP. Normally you would just select one column for your return range, but that's if you wanted to return a single number. And here you actually want to return a horizontal array of four numbers, so that's why you're selecting four columns. Then you're going to close parentheses on the inside nested XLOOKUP. Then you're going to hit comma. And now what's happening is this outside XLOOKUP is trying to find the XP in the results of this internal XLOOKUP. So then you want to give the outside XLOOKUP its return array. So you're going to select the easy, medium, hard, and deadly here and hit comma. And then, like with before, say that if it doesn't find a result there, let's return too easy in quotes, and then comma, and then like before, the match mode should be -1. So it returns the exact match or next smaller item, and then close parentheses on the outer XLOOKUP. And now this gives us the same result as before. So you can see if we changed here, these are going to update and be exactly the same. So that was how to use a nested double XLOOKUP. If you stuck around for this bonus lesson, thanks. Please like and subscribe, and check out rockstarexcel.com so we can help make you an Excel rockstar.